The great council chamber of Nexus Prime stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its crystalline walls reaching toward a ceiling that disappeared into shadow. Representatives from 743 species sat in perfect rings around the central speaking platform, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolution's creativity. Some floated in energy bubbles, others required specialized atmosphere domes, and a few existed as pure thought given temporary form. At the center of this magnificent assembly stood Elder Thane of the Corvashi, his ancient form barely supported by the ceremonial staff that had been carved from the heartwood of his homeworld's first tree. His 6 eyes, each the size of a human head, swept across the gathered representatives with the weight of 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom. "Young ones," his voice resonated through both air and the telepathic networks that connected the diverse minds present. "We gather today to discuss a matter of grave importance. The species known as humanity has been observed for the past 200 of their years. The time has come to address their unique nature." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The humans were known to most species, though few had direct contact with them. They remained confined to their small system on the outer rim of the galaxy, apparently unaware that a vast galactic civilization existed beyond their detection capabilities. Commander Zephys of the Altarian fleet rose from his crystalline seat, his 4 arms gesturing in the formal patterns of request to speak. The Altarians were a relatively young species, having achieved spaceflight only 3,000 years ago, but they had proven themselves capable warriors and explorers. "Elder Thane," Zephys's voice carried the confidence of a species that had never known true defeat. "Surely you do not suggest we should fear these humans? Our preliminary observations show them to be a primitive species, barely capable of traveling to their own moon with any consistency. They fight among themselves constantly, waste their resources on trivial pursuits, and show no signs of the unity that marks a truly advanced civilization." The elder's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him well noticed the slight tightening around his primary eyes. "Commander Zephys, your observations are accurate in their details but lacking in their understanding. Yes, humans appear primitive by our standards. Yes, they engage in conflicts amongst themselves. But there is something else, something that those who have studied them closely have come to understand." "With respect, Elder," interrupted Ambassador Quite of the Hive Collective, her insectoid form clicking with agitation. "What could possibly make these isolated primates worthy of our concern? The collective has studied thousands of developing species, and humans show none of the markers we associate with galactic-level threats. They lack unity, they waste energy on emotion, and they seem incapable of thinking beyond their immediate circumstances." Elder Thane moved slowly to the central display, activating holographic projectors that had been built using technology older than most of the species present. Images began to form in the air above the assembly, humans in various situations throughout their history. "Observe," the elder began, "the human response to what they term impossible situations. The first hologram showed a human settlement surrounded by hostile environment. Temperatures that would kill most species within minutes, atmospheric pressure that would crush the average galactic citizen, and radiation levels that would sterilize entire planets. Yet the humans not only survived, they thrived, building structures and technologies that turned the hostile environment into their advantage. They call this place Antarctica," Thane continued. "Notice how they don't simply endure the harsh conditions. They actively seek them out for recreation." The next image showed humans in space, not in the advanced life support systems most species required, but in primitive suits that should have been death traps. Yet they moved with confidence, even playfulness, in environments that represented the ultimate hostile frontier. But perhaps most telling, Thane gestured, and the display showed something that made several representatives recoil. Is their response to threats. The hologram depicted a human child, no larger than most species young, facing a predator 10 times its size. Instead of fleeing or submitting as any rational being would do, the child stood its ground, picked up a stick, and began to attack the larger creature with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere primal and unstoppable. This behavior pattern repeats throughout their history, Thane continued, showing image after image. When faced with superior force, humans do not calculate odds. They do not seek compromise. They do not surrender. They adapt, they innovate, and they attack with a persistence that defies logical explanation. Commander Zephys shifted uncomfortably. Surely, Elder, you're not suggesting that primitive stubbornness represents a threat to advanced civilizations? Let me show you something else, Thane replied, changing the display to show human technological development. This species progressed from basic tool use to nuclear weapons in less than 10,000 years. Most species require 50 to 100,000 years for similar advancement. But here's what makes it truly remarkable. They didn't develop these technologies through careful, logical progression. The hologram showed the human invention timeline, compressed into visual format. The pattern was chaotic, with massive leaps forward during times of conflict and crisis. They invent their greatest advances under pressure, Thane explained. When threatened, when challenged, when told something is impossible, that's when humans achieve the unthinkable. Their entire technological history is a series of problems solved by individuals who refused to accept that solutions didn't exist. With respect, interjected Science Minister Vex of the Quantum Commonwealth, his energy form flickering with analytical patterns. Rapid technological development, while impressive, is not unprecedented. The real question is whether they possess the wisdom to use such advancement responsibly. Elder Thane's laugh was a sound like ancient wind through stone. Ah, Minister Vex, you touch upon the heart of the matter. Let me show you how humans define responsible use. The display shifted to show human history. Wars, conflicts, and disasters that should have destroyed their species completely. Yet in each case, instead of destruction leading to extinction, it led to growth, innovation, and expansion. They fought a war so terrible they called it the Great War, believing nothing could be worse. When proved wrong, they fought an even larger conflict they called the World War. But notice, each terrible conflict drove innovations that ultimately improved their capabilities and expanded their reach. Representative Kala of the Peaceful Confederation, her translucent form glowing with distress, rose to speak. Elder Thane, surely you cannot be suggesting that we admire such violent tendencies. The Confederation has existed in harmony for 8,000 years precisely because we learned to resolve conflicts without violence. I suggest nothing, Representative Kala, Thane replied gently. I merely observe. And what I observe is a species that turns every challenge, every threat, every impossible situation into an opportunity for growth. They don't just survive adversity. They use it as fuel for advancement. The elder paused, allowing his words to settle across the assembly. But there is something else, something perhaps more important than their technological capability or their refusal to surrender. He activated a new sequence of images. Humans helping other humans during disasters, sacrificing themselves for strangers, sharing resources with those who had nothing to offer in return. They extend this same protective instinct to others, Thane continued. When humans adopt something into their group, whether another human, an animal, even an idea, they defend it with the same ferocity they show when defending themselves. Surely, Commander Zephys said, his voice now showing the first hints of uncertainty. This is simple pack behavior, common among many species. Is it? Thane asked, showing new images. These humans risked their lives to save domestic animals during natural disasters. These ones died protecting trees they believed were important. These organized massive rescue operations for creatures they had never seen before, simply because they heard those creatures were in danger. The assembly fell silent as the implications began to register. "Now," Elder Thane continued, "let me show you something that should concern us all." The display changed to show telescopic observations of human space activities. Their primitive spacecraft were crude by galactic standards, but there was something disturbing about their trajectory patterns. They are already beginning to spread beyond their homeworld. Their technology improves at an exponential rate, and most importantly, they are starting to ask the right questions. The hologram showed human scientists, their primitive instruments pointed toward the galaxy, searching for signs of intelligent life. "They know we exist," Thane stated simply. "They don't know who we are or where we are, but they know someone is out here. They've detected some of our more obvious energy signatures, though they interpret them as natural phenomena. But they're looking, and humans have a remarkable talent for finding things they're looking for." Commander Zephys rose again, his posture now less confident than before. "Elder, even if everything you say is true, they remain a single species on one world. Surely the combined might of the Galactic Council could contain any threat they might pose." Elder Thane turned his primary gaze directly on the commander, and those nearby could feel the weight of ancient wisdom and terrible understanding in that look. "Commander Zephys, you speak of containing humans as if they were a natural disaster, a storm to be weathered or a fire to be controlled. But storms don't innovate. Fires don't adapt. And neither storms nor fires feel loyalty to anything beyond themselves." He gestured toward the display, which now showed human exploration missions, crude spacecraft pushing into the void despite tremendous risk, crews that continued their missions even when facing certain death. "What happens, Commander, when a species that never surrenders, never stops innovating, and protects anything it considers family, discovers that someone has been watching them from the shadows? What happens when they learn that we've been studying them like laboratory specimens while making decisions about their future without their involvement?" The question hung in the air like a toxic gas. Around the chamber, representatives began to understand the implications of what the elder was suggesting. "Furthermore," Thane continued, "what happens when humans, a species that has turned every external threat into an opportunity for growth, decide that we represent such a threat?" Representative Kayla's glow dimmed with growing fear. "Surely, Elder, you're not suggesting they could pose a threat to the entire galactic community?" "I'm suggesting nothing," Thane replied. "I'm stating a fact based on 10,000 years of observation and analysis. Humans don't just respond to threats, they eliminate them, completely, permanently. And they do so with an innovation and determination that increases exponentially under pressure." He activated final sequence of images, human responses to natural disasters, diseases, and environmental challenges that should have been insurmountable. They didn't just survive the ice ages, they used them to spread across their entire planet. They didn't just endure diseases, they eliminated them so thoroughly that most exist now only in laboratory samples. They didn't just adapt to their environment, they reshaped it to suit their needs. When humans perceive a threat to something they protect, Thane concluded, they don't negotiate, they don't compromise, they don't retreat. They engineer solutions that ensure the threat can never arise again. The chamber fell into profound silence as the full weight of the elder's words settled over the assembly. Commander Zephys, who had entered the session confident in the superiority of galactic civilization, now sat quietly, his four hands clasped in an unconscious gesture of defensive positioning. "What do you recommend, Elder?" asked Science Minister Vex, his energy form flickering with uncertainty patterns. "I recommend," Thane said slowly, that we remember we are dealing with a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history turning impossible challenges into opportunities for growth. We must ask ourselves, do we want to become one of those challenges? But even as the elders spoke these words of caution, in the back sections of the Great Assembly, certain representatives exchanged glances that suggested not all were convinced that these primitive humans posed any real threat to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. The warning had been given. The evidence had been presented. The choice of how to respond lay with each species individually. Some would listen, others would not. And in the vast darkness of space, humanity continued to reach toward the stars, unaware that their future, and the future of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance of that choice. 3 months after the Great Assembly on Nexus Prime, Commander Zephys stood in the command center of the Altarian dreadnought Celestial Dominion, staring at tactical displays that showed the human system in perfect detail. The massive warship, over 15 kilometers in length and armed with weapons capable of shattering planets, hung in the void just outside the detection range of human sensors. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we've completed our detailed scans of the system. The humans have established small outposts on several worlds and asteroids, but their technology remains primitive. Their most advanced vessels would barely qualify as shuttlecraft by our standards." Zephys nodded. Though his mind kept returning to Elder Thane's warnings, the old Korvashi had painted a picture of humanity that seemed impossible to reconcile with what the Altarian fleet was observing. These humans were clearly intelligent, but they showed none of the unity or technological advancement that marked truly dangerous species. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Hegemony Council." The holographic image of War Master Krex materialized above the command platform. The Hegemony representative was a towering figure even by Altarian standards, his metallic carapace gleaming with the enhancement modules that marked his rank. "Commander Zephys," Krex's voice carried the authority of a species that had conquered 47 star systems in the past millennium. "I trust your reconnaissance mission is proceeding successfully?" "Yes, War Master. The human system is exactly as our initial surveys indicated. They pose no credible threat to galactic security." Krex's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Excellent. The Hegemony Council has reviewed the Elders' concerns, and we've reached a consensus. These humans may indeed possess some unusual characteristics, but they remain an isolated, primitive species. The galaxy cannot be held hostage by fear of every developing civilization." Zephys felt a mixture of relief and unease. The Hegemony Council included representatives from 12 of the galaxy's most powerful military species. If they had concluded that humanity posed no threat, surely his own doubts were unfounded. "What are our orders, War Master?" "You will implement Protocol 7, Krex announced. "Establish a monitoring station in the outer system and begin the standard civilization management procedures. If the humans advance too quickly, if they develop dangerous technologies, or if they attempt to expand beyond their current system, you will take appropriate containment measures." Protocol 7 was a well-established procedure used throughout the galaxy to manage developing species. It involved subtle manipulation of technological development, redirection of exploration efforts, and when necessary, targeted interventions to prevent dangerous advancement. It had been successfully implemented on over 300 species. "Sir," Zephys said carefully, "Elder Thane specifically warned against any interference with human development." "Elder Thane is a relic of the past," Krex replied dismissively. "His species ruled the galaxy when space travel required generation ships. The Hegemony Council represents the current balance of power, and we will not allow fear-mongering to dictate galactic policy." The transmission ended, leaving Zephys alone with his orders and his doubts. He looked again at the tactical displays showing the human system. Their space installations were laughably vulnerable. Their vessels moved with the awkward clumsiness of atmospheric craft adapted for void use. Their entire civilization could be controlled with minimal effort. "Navigation," he ordered. "Set course for the asteroid field between the 4th and 5th planets. We'll establish our monitoring station there." As the celestial dominion moved deeper into the human system, automated sensors deployed throughout the region, creating an invisible network of surveillance and control systems. Within hours, the Altarian fleet had eyes and ears throughout human space. On the 3rd planet, in a facility the humans called Mission Control Houston, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screens with growing confusion. The radio telescope array had been detecting unusual energy signatures for the past week, but nothing that matched any known natural phenomenon. "Marcus," she called to her colleague, "are you seeing these readings?" Dr. Marcus Webb moved to her workstation and studied the data. "These look like focused energy patterns, not random cosmic radiation. The distribution is too regular, too organized." "That's what I thought," Sarah replied. "But look at this. The signatures are moving. Whatever's generating them is actively changing position within our system." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. For 15 years, he had been part of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, hoping to find evidence of alien civilization. But now, faced with what appeared to be actual proof, his first emotion was fear. "Sarah, we need to inform the director immediately." Within 6 hours, the discovery had been reported through proper channels to the highest levels of multiple governments. Within 12 hours, every major space agency and military organization on Earth was tracking the mysterious energy signatures. Aboard the Celestial Dominion, Zephys received the first indication that something had changed. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "the humans are redirecting their observation equipment. They're actively scanning for our presence." "How is that possible?" Zephys demanded. "Our stealth systems are based on technology thousands of years in advance of their capabilities." "Sir, they're not trying to detect our ships directly. They're tracking the energy signatures of our surveillance network. Their primitive sensors can't identify what they're seeing, but they can detect that something artificial is operating in their system." Zephys studied the tactical display with growing concern. The humans weren't just passively observing the energy signatures. They were analyzing them, attempting to establish patterns and predict locations. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're detecting increased activity throughout their system. Multiple spacecraft are changing course toward the locations of our surveillance posts." "What kind of spacecraft?" Zephys asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Military vessels, sir. They're primitive, but they're armed and moving with clear tactical intent." For the first time since entering the human system, Zephys began to understand what Elder Thane had been trying to warn them about. These humans hadn't cowered in fear when they detected alien presence in their system. They hadn't attempted to hide or seek peaceful contact. Their first response had been to mobilize their military forces and investigate the potential threat. "Commander!" War Master Krex's hologram materialized without warning. "We're monitoring the situation. The humans appear to be responding to your presence more quickly than anticipated." "Yes, sir. They've detected our surveillance network and are moving to investigate." "Unacceptable," Krex stated flatly. "Primitive species should not be capable of detecting advanced stealth technology. You will implement active containment measures." Zephys felt his breathing apparatus constrict. "Sir, Elder Thane specifically warned against any aggressive action toward humans." "Elder Thane is not in command of this operation," Krex replied coldly. "You will disable their spacecraft and demonstrate the consequences of unauthorized investigation. Make it clear that their continued expansion will not be tolerated." The connection ended, leaving Zephys with orders that he suspected would prove to be a terrible mistake. On Earth, Admiral Jennifer Harrison stood in the Pentagon's Joint Operations Center, studying satellite feeds and communication intercepts from around the globe. The mysterious energy signatures had been detected by every major spacefaring nation, and the response had been immediate and unified in a way that surprised even the most optimistic diplomats. "Admiral," her aide reported, "the International Space Defense Coalition has been formally established. 12 nations have committed military assets, and another 23 have pledged support resources." Harrison nodded grimly. "How long since first detection?" 18 hours, ma'am." 18 hours, Harrison repeated. "In 18 hours, we've gone from discovering we're not alone in the universe to establishing a unified defense command. I wonder if our visitors expected that." "Ma'am, our deep space monitoring stations are reporting new activity. Whatever's out there, it's moving toward our ships." Through the vast network of human communication systems, information flowed at the speed of light. Military commanders who had spent their careers preparing for conflicts between nations found themselves coordinating against a threat from beyond their world. Scientists who had dreamed of first contact with alien civilization now worked frantically to analyze potential weapon systems. In laboratories around the world, researchers began the most accelerated development program in human history. If they were dealing with advanced alien technology, they needed countermeasures, and they needed them immediately. The first confrontation occurred near Mars orbit, where the human vessel Defiant encountered an Altarian patrol craft. The human ship was a converted deep space exploration vessel, hastily fitted with military equipment and carrying a crew of volunteers. Captain Rodriguez stared at his screens as the alien vessel uncloaked directly ahead of them. The ship was beautiful in its alienness, flowing lines and energy patterns that suggested technology far beyond human capability. "Communications," Rodriguez ordered. "Transmit standard first contact protocols." The response came not as words, but as a weapon discharge that passed just meters from the Defiant's hull, a clear warning shot. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "they're signaling us to change course and withdraw." Rodriguez considered his options. The alien vessel could clearly destroy his ship without effort. The logical response would be to retreat, report the encounter, and leave first contact to the diplomats. Instead, he thought about the 1,800 people living and working on Mars, now potentially at the mercy of unknown aliens with hostile intent. "All stations," Rodriguez announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. We came out here to determine whether our solar system is being invaded by hostile forces. We have our answer. Weapons free. Protect the colonists." The battle lasted 11 seconds. The Defiant's primitive missiles and energy weapons should have been harmlessly absorbed by the Altarian vessel's defensive systems. Instead, the human weapons had been modified with innovations developed in the past 18 hours. Focused electromagnetic pulses, projectiles designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities detected in the alien energy signatures, and tactics that assumed their own destruction while maximizing damage to the enemy. When the Altarian patrol craft exploded, the shock wave was detected by monitoring stations throughout the solar system. Aboard the Celestial Dominion, Zephys stared at the tactical display in shock. "How is that possible?" "Sir," his tactical officer's voice was tight with disbelief, "the human vessel exploited weaknesses in our defensive systems that shouldn't exist. Their weapons were specifically designed to counter our technology." "That's impossible. They've had less than one standard day to analyze our energy signatures." "Sir, they're transmitting on all frequencies now." The human communication was simple, broadcast in mathematical concepts that could be understood by any technological civilization. "This is humanity. You have entered our system without permission and demonstrated hostile intent. We do not know who you are or where you come from. We do not care. Leave now, or we will destroy you." Zephys realized that Elder Thane had been absolutely correct about one thing. When humans perceived a threat, they didn't negotiate. They didn't seek compromise. They engineered solutions designed to eliminate the threat entirely. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human system. They're preparing something." On Earth, the crash program had produced results that should have taken years to develop. Human engineers, given 18 hours and the motivation of potential extinction, had created weapons systems, defensive technologies, and tactical innovations that leveraged their species' unique approach to problem solving. They had also made a decision that would echo through galactic history. If advanced aliens considered humanity a threat worth containing, then humanity would prove them absolutely right. The message transmitted from Earth was heard by every monitoring station in the galaxy. "This is humanity. We know you're watching us. We know you've been studying us. We know you think you can control us. You're wrong. We're coming." Throughout the solar system, modified human vessels began moving not inward toward the safety of their home planet, but outward, toward the stars, carrying weapons and technologies that had been impossible the day before. Elder Thane, monitoring the situation from his chambers on Nexus Prime, closed his ancient eyes and whispered a prayer to long-dead gods. The warning had been ignored, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when you tried to cage a species that had spent millions of years turning every cage into a tool for breaking free. The humans were no longer content to be studied and contained. They were coming to find those who had presumed to judge them, and they were very, very angry. 6 months after the first human vessel had destroyed an Altarian patrol craft, the galaxy found itself in a state of crisis unlike anything in recorded history. In the Great Council Chamber of Nexus Prime, representatives from over 1,000 species had gathered in emergency session, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate confusion. Elder Thane moved slowly to the central platform, his ancient form now supported by 2 younger Corvashi attendants. The weight of 10,000 years seemed to press down upon his shoulders as he surveyed the chaos before him. "Honored representatives," his voice cut through the noise, carrying the authority of age and wisdom, "we gathered today to confront the consequences of choices made in ignorance and arrogance." The chamber fell silent, though the tension remained thick enough to taste. 6 months ago, I warned this council about the nature of humanity. I was dismissed by some as an old fool, clinging to outdated fears. Today, I stand before you as entire star systems burn, as refugee fleets flee through space, and as the very foundations of galactic civilization tremble before the advance of a species that was supposed to be primitive and containable. In the front rows, Commander Zephys sat with his head bowed, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of profound shame. The Altarian fleet had been among the first to face the human advance, and the results had been catastrophic. "Elder," spoke Ambassador Velox of the Trading Federation, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy, "surely the situation can't be as dire as our reports suggest. These humans may have achieved some temporary victories through luck and desperation, but they remain a single species with limited resources." Thane activated the central display, and images began to form that made several representatives recoil in horror. The hologram showed star maps marking human expansion over the past 6 months, a spreading wave of red markers indicating conquered systems, established bases, and active human fleets. "Single species with limited resources," Thane repeated slowly. "Let me show you what those limitations have accomplished." The display focused on the Altarian home system, where massive construction platforms now orbited the primary star. Human vessels, no longer the crude spacecraft of 6 months ago, moved in perfect formations around installations that rivaled anything the galaxy had ever produced. "The humans didn't just defeat the Altarian fleet," Thane explained. "They captured it, analyzed it, improved upon it, and began mass production of superior vessels within 30 standard days. They turned the Altarian shipyards into factories producing human designs that incorporate technology from every species they've encountered. Representative Kayla of the Peaceful Confederation glowed with distress. Elder, surely they can be negotiated with. All species are capable of reason. Negotiated with? Thane's laugh was like wind through a graveyard. Let me show you their response to diplomatic overtures. The display changed to show a recording from the Hegemony's attempted peace conference. War Master Krex, the same leader who had ordered the containment of humanity, stood before a human delegation in what should have been neutral space. We are prepared to offer humanity membership in the galactic community, Krex was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who still didn't understand what he was dealing with. In exchange for ceasing your aggressive expansion and accepting reasonable restrictions on your technological development. The human representative, Admiral Harrison herself, Thane noted, listened calmly before responding. War Master Krex, let me make our position clear. 6 months ago, you decided that humanity needed to be contained. You sent warships into our system without invitation. You attempted to control our development and expansion. You made a fundamental error in judgment. What error? Krex had demanded. You assumed we wanted to join your civilization, Harrison replied. We don't. We don't want your membership, your restrictions, or your oversight. We want you to leave us alone. Since you've proven incapable of doing that voluntarily, we'll make it involuntary. The recording continued, showing Krex's growing anger. You cannot seriously believe that one primitive species can stand against the combined might of the galactic community. One primitive species? Harrison had smiled, and that smile had chilled Thane when he first saw it. War Master, let me explain something about human nature. When you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. When you attack our home, you become an enemy of every human being who will ever exist. And humans have a very long memory for enemies. We could destroy your entire species, Krex had threatened. Yes, Harrison agreed calmly. You probably could. But the question isn't whether you could destroy us. The question is, how many of you would survive the attempt? And whether any of you would enjoy what comes after. The recording ended with human vessels uncloaking around the diplomatic station. Ships that shouldn't have existed, armed with weapons that shouldn't have been possible, crewed by beings who had transformed 6 months of conflict into the greatest technological advancement in galactic history. The Hegemony fleet was obliterated, Thane continued. Not defeated, obliterated. The humans didn't just win the battle, they eliminated every trace of Hegemony presence in 17 star systems. But that wasn't the truly terrifying part. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. The terrifying part was what they did next. They began searching for Hegemony colony worlds, not to conquer them, but to evacuate them. Every civilian population in those systems was relocated to neutral territory with full supplies and protection. The humans destroyed every military installation, every government facility, every symbol of Hegemony power. But they went out of their way to protect innocent beings. Science Minister Vex, his energy form flickering with confusion patterns, rose to speak. Elder, that seems contradictory. If they're so dangerous, why show mercy to civilians? Because, Thane replied, that's what makes them truly terrifying. They're not mindless destroyers or simple conquerors. They're protectors who have identified threats to what they protect. And what they protect, Minister Vex, is apparently the right of every species to develop without interference from self-appointed galactic authorities. The chamber erupted in voices as the implications became clear. The humans weren't trying to conquer the galaxy, they were dismantling the power structures that had ruled it for millennia. Order! Thane called, his voice cutting through the chaos. There is more you must understand. The display changed to show human diplomatic missions, not to governments or councils, but to individual species throughout the galaxy. Small human vessels appeared in star systems everywhere, carrying messages that were being broadcast simultaneously across thousands of worlds. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Exploratory Fleet," the recorded message began. "We bring greetings from humanity and an apology for the circumstances of our introduction to the galactic community. We have recently learned that many of you have been subject to the same monitoring, manipulation, and control that was attempted on our species. We're here to offer an alternative." Thane paused the recording and looked directly at the representatives. "Do you understand what they're doing? They're not conquering worlds. They're liberating them. Every species that has chafed under galactic authority, every civilization that has been held back by Protocol 7 restrictions, every world that has been forced to limit its development for the greater good of galactic stability, the humans are offering them freedom." Ambassador Quite of the Hive Collective clicked with agitation. "Elder, surely the established order exists for good reasons. Without central authority, without oversight, the galaxy would descend into chaos." "Would it?" Thane asked. "Or would it become something that those in power couldn't control?" He resumed the recording, where Admiral Chen was explaining humanity's offer. "We're not asking anyone to join us," Chen continued. "We're not demanding tribute or allegiance or submission to human authority. We're simply saying that if you want to develop your technology without restrictions, if you want to explore the galaxy without permission, if you want to make your own choices about your species' future, we'll help you defend that right." The response, Thane told the Assembly, has been overwhelming. In the past month, over 200 species have accepted human assistance in throwing off galactic oversight. The humans haven't conquered a single world, but they've gained the voluntary allegiance of a third of the galaxy. Commander Zephys finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of his failure. "Elder Thane, what can we do? How do we contain this situation?" Thane's 6 eyes focused on the Altarian commander with something approaching pity. "Contain? Commander, you still don't understand. This situation passed beyond containment the moment your fleet fired the first shot. You awakened a species that spent millions of years turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Now they see the entire galactic power structure as a challenge to be overcome." "But surely," Representative Kayla pleaded, "there must be some way to reach an accommodation, some way to coexist peacefully." "There is," Thane replied. "The humans have made their terms abundantly clear. Leave them alone. Leave their allies alone. Stop trying to control the development of other species. Allow the galaxy to grow and change naturally without the interference of self-appointed guardians." "That would mean the end of everything we've built," Ambassador Velox protested. "Thousands of years of civilization, of order, of peace." "Yes," Thane agreed. "It would mean the end of a galactic order based on the assumption that elder species have the right to control younger ones. It would mean the end of a peace maintained through the suppression of natural development. It would mean the end of a stability that required the denial of freedom to countless civilizations." He gestured toward the display, which now showed the current state of the galaxy. Human vessels moved freely through space that had been controlled by galactic authorities for millennia. Newly liberated species were sharing technologies and resources without oversight or restriction. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization was dissolving into something unprecedented. "The humans are offering us a choice," Thane continued. "We can continue to fight them, continue to insist on our right to control others, and watch as our fleets are destroyed and our authority collapses. Or we can accept that perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy doesn't need our protection from itself." "And if we choose wrongly?" asked Science Minister Vex. Thane's expression grew grim. "Then we'll learn why human space is expanding by 3 star systems every standard day, why their technology advances faster than our best scientists can track, and why every species that has fought them has either been destroyed or joined them voluntarily." He paused, then continued with the weight of absolute certainty. We'll learn that humans don't just win wars, they remake reality to ensure their enemies can never threaten anyone again. And we'll discover that a species which spent its entire evolutionary history turning impossible situations into opportunities for growth considers the hostile attention of the entire galaxy to be just another impossible situation to overcome. In the silence that followed, Elder Thane delivered the final truth that would reshape the galaxy. The choice is simple. We can learn to coexist with a species that protects freedom above all else, or we can be remembered as the galactic order that was too proud to recognize that true civilization might require giving up the power to control others. I warned you not to stir humanity, he concluded. Someone ignored that warning. Now we all must live with the consequences. As the Great Assembly dissolved into desperate discussions and frantic planning sessions, Elder Thane remained on the platform, watching the displays that showed human vessels spreading throughout the galaxy like seeds of change. They carried with them technologies that liberated rather than conquered, weapons that defended rather than oppressed, and a message that resonated with every species that had ever dreamed of true freedom. The warning had been ignored. Humanity had been stirred from its peaceful isolation and thrust into galactic conflict. The result was not the conquest of the galaxy, but its liberation. And in the vast networks of human communication, already connecting dozens of species across hundreds of star systems, a new message was being transmitted, not as a threat or a demand, but as a simple statement of fact. We are humanity. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We defend those who seek freedom. We stand against those who would control others. We remember those who wrong us, and we never forget those who stand with us. Welcome to a galaxy where every species has the right to reach for the stars. Elder Thane smiled for the first time in centuries, understanding at last that the galaxy had not been conquered by humanity. It had been set free by it. The ancient order of control and limitation was ending, and something unprecedented was beginning. The elders had cautioned against stirring humanity. Someone had ignored the warning, and the galaxy would never be the same.